Welcome, brave soul, to the shadows where fear lives and breathes. Here in the quiet corners of the mind, ordinary terrors awaken, phobias that coil around your thoughts, tightening with every heartbeat. You cannot look away. You cannot escape. This is Phobia of Fear.
My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was a local call, so I took it. "Hello," I said. "This is the sheriff's office. Are you any relation with Natalia Stoika?" I sat up. The name didn't come to me right away. Though familiar, seconds ticked, connecting dots. Natalia. I have a great-aunt Talia. Natalia is probably her full name. Stoika. That was my grandmother's maiden name. Yes, Aunt Talia, that must be her. The dots connected for now. Yes, she's my great-aunt. My mind was still searching for dots to complete the image. The caller's soft words connected the dots that formed an image of an old woman. "I regret to inform you she has died." Her silence was room for me to react and pour out my emotions. It wasn't there. Aunt Natalia was practically a stranger. I hadn't seen her in 10 years or so. While my grandmother was alive, my parents took my brother and I a few times to visit. What I remembered were flashes, stills of a small, hunched woman with hair of tarnished silver. She lived across town from us. It isn't a large town, medium-sized, I guess, with a nice downtown. The older homes, over 120 years old or more, circled the 4 or 5 streets of buildings and parking garages. A cloudy childhood memory emerged, jutting down a bumpy cobblestone street. Screaming sirens and colorful graffiti on every wall made downtown I didn't want to go. "Oh," I finally said. These last 2 years I had completely forgotten about her. Guilt spread over my shoulders like a weighted blanket. "Well, your number was posted on the refrigerator. Are there any other relatives, maybe someone closer to her we should call?" she said. I perked up. No, it's just me. "And my brother," I said. Thoughts of dealing with her burial in the house and all the junk circled my mind. The weight I felt was back, but this time it wasn't guilt, it was the inconvenience. My wife and I had just recently had a baby, and with work in the new house, all our free time cinched like a knot around our necks. "You can stop by the station and show some ID for a key to the house if you don't have one. But until we see a will, you can't remove anything from the house." She went on about a thing or two. I stopped listening until the line went dead. My mind was focused on the work ahead. As I mentally inventoried the place, as it was 10 years ago, I thought of the antiques that must be in there. It was my great-grandparents before Natalia. With the regentrification happening around downtown, the real estate value must have gone up. All of it would be mine, and my brother's, of course. I was sitting up on the edge of the couch, counting the dollars I would inherit. I went to a home sales app and searched for the property for its value. The house itself wasn't listed, but the surrounding ones were, and they had sold recently for twice what I was expecting. Suddenly, the burden lifted as I put in a time-off request at work. I could play it up, death in the family. My boss couldn't possibly deny me. Instead of calling my brother Rod, I went through my house, checking every drawer and cubby I could think of, looking for a key to Aunt Talia's place. Sure, the sheriff had a key, but going down to the station and signing paperwork, taking possession, was so official. I'd probably have to get my brother involved, and I wanted into that house first, unofficially, take a look around, create an inventory of valuables. I had no intention of completely cheating my brother out of his portion. I paused when in the second dresser drawer was a photo of my parents, Rod, and I as well. I wasn't married yet, and Rod had all his hair. All of us on our parents' porch, Mom in her burgundy dress, Dad in his plaid flannel, and Rod in his itchy gray wool sweater. That was the last time we were all together. My parents didn't exactly die that year. We don't know what happened to them. They just disappeared one day. About 8 years ago now. After a few days of not talking or texting, I stopped by and no one was home. The car was gone, but nothing else, besides my mom's purse and my dad's wallet. Just what you would expect if they went out shopping or to see friends. They never returned. It made one news cycle and then vanished just as they had. Rod held a good job, lived alone, and made smart investments. All the things I didn't. Still at my high school job, but manager now, with a wife, and let's be honest, an unexpected child, is how I turned out. Some of my investments hadn't paid off like I hoped. The gaming commission gets suspicious of a horse with the odds stacked against it, suddenly dominating a race. And the people that I got to invest with me in horse, well, they don't take losing their money too well.
Yeah, I needed there to be lots of money in that old house. I'm not a messy person, but I do like to squirrel things away. My 30-year drawer, some call it a junk drawer, it's where things go I think I might need in the future, but really should be trash. If there was a key, it would be there. I dumped the contents of the drawer out on the bed. I had already searched for it once, but a nagging feeling I had kept something in there wouldn't stop until I inventoried every single item in there. My fingers fumbled through the pile of receipts and an old pill bottle with the labels torn off that rattled with coins, safety pins, and other small metallics. I kept it, hoping I would find the missing match. An old pill bottle had a small rock with a tiny vein of gold I found once, hiking in the desert. A silver cigarette case caught my eye, a gift from my aunt. When I clicked it open, it made sense. An old brass key fell out. Tarnished and worn on all edges, I wondered if it still worked. Avoiding the sheriff was worth a try of the key. My mouth watered at the excitement of getting an early peek at what was in the house. That twinge of excitement you get starting off on a roller coaster built in my gut. What a ride this was going to be. That night, I lay awake trying to picture all I had seen on my last visit 10 years ago. Or even longer ago. What had I seen? Surely there was something of value in that house. Nothing to get excited about, but I was excited. At some point, my wife got up to feed our hungry son. She was still breastfeeding him. Doing my best impersonation of a corpse, I just lay there, blocking his cries out with thoughts of riches. My new start in life was happening today. Even with the crying baby, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned. When my wife came back, she asked if I was all right. Sure, never better. She felt my forehead for a fever. I had a fever all right, but it wasn't the flu. Jittery legs, tapping fingers. I finally got out of bed and went downstairs to the couch. A list of every debt I had, from my crappy, overpriced car to Benny at the horse track, was written down. The list was growing and turning my nerves from excitement to nausea. Doubts scrambled my joy into fear that the old house would be full of junk, and I was tasked with getting rid of it. No, there was value there. The land, at least, was enough to get me afloat again. The cycle of excitement and dread got me up, pacing around. How I waited for the sun to rise. Going in with a flashlight in that neighborhood was a bad idea. Finally, a sliver of orange sun broke through the darkness outside. Noise from the street grew as trucks let out clutches and commuters began honking at one another. It was time to get over there and cash in my chips. Not wanting to wake my wife, I searched a dark closet with my fingertips, sifting over hanging shirts, but couldn't land on my favorite flannel. It should be here. I hadn't worn it since last fall. Giving up, I dressed in sour-smelling sweats I had hanging on the back of the closet door. Doing my best cat burglar impression, I tiptoed out of there.
At the first red light, my boss texted to tell me she got my email and give her condolences. That bought me the day. At the gas station, I got coffee, a bottle of water, and a couple of donuts. I planned to stay a while, and I didn't want hunger or thirst to distract me. Tools? What about some tools? A shovel and something to break up the floor, or even chisel out some bricks? People can be very crafty when hiding valuables. My next stop was a hardware store. From the discount bin, I bought a hammer and chisel. Walking out of the store felt like I was about to start a life of crime. B&E, larceny, other criminal terms for things I was going to do raced through my mind. It calmed the internal shaking and filled me with an adrenaline rush. The reality was, the house was basically mine, would be soon enough, same with all the contents, but the idea of this new life of crime was much more thrilling than checking out my dead great-aunt's house. I indulged that cat burglar feeling. The turn onto her street brought back some memories. Even 10 years ago, this street was well into decline. Condemned homes, burned-down homes, roofs with old faded blue tarps that were now fringed at the ends. The houses were all turn of the century, the last century, wood frames that were now sagging from years of bearing packed snow in winter and a fighting humidity in the summer. Paint flaked in chunks, exposing tired gray wood on every gable and corbel. The dollar signs in my eyes shrank as I watched the residents of this street shuffle along, aimlessly, not off to the office or school. With zero signs of regentrification happening, I was suspecting this would be more trouble than it was worth. The house sat high up from the street. I looked up at my inheritance. Overgrown grass covered most of the walk, and the trees hugged all corners of the house. Just the sharp apex of the roof was showing. Scabbed paint from around a rectangular window became the all-seeing eye, like on the back of a dollar bill, and it stared unblinking at me. Unease tingled through my limbs. With lungs full of air, I got out of my car, then hurried up the steps and along the walk. Stepping onto porch was like entering a cave, dark and walled in with vines and shrubs. The only way out was behind me. I raised my hand to knock, then remembered I had a key. The thrill surged, pushing aside fear as I dug out the key and inserted it into the lock. Then I found there was no need for a key. The officials that removed the body of my great-aunt left the door unlocked. With some effort, the door swung open against stiff hinges. I remained still as musty and moldy air settled around me, then pressed on, walking into the entry. A small table to my left, covered in lace and doilies, held a green glass dish with pennies older than myself, but not worth more than face value. It didn't matter. The rest of the house lay before me. Still dark from the out-of-control vegetation covering every window, I looked for a light switch. I flipped it on, heard a crackling charge through the wall, then twin-mounted sconces above the brick fireplace flickered, settling into an orange glow. Thoughts of old cloth wiring igniting any second filled my head. This old stick-frame house would go up so fast, I might not make it out. I flipped off the lights. My cell phone would have to be my guide through this maze of old lady and war-era furnishings. Once past the entryway, I picked up a worn trail in the area rug that continued over the wood flooring. Aunt Natalia must have followed this path thousands of times over the course of her life. As I passed the mantel, the light reflected off a picture, my grandmother and great-aunt. I took it, smearing away the dust to see two small girls standing next to a cart and donkey. The old country, I'd hear it referred to. Somewhere in Europe, Romania, I think. The two looked poor, but happy. I pressed on through the house, a sense of connection growing. Seeing Aunt Natalia, the poverty she came from, and now here, in a large house on a once well-to-do street. A drop of pride caught in my throat. I swallowed it down and went back to finding out how much money was in this place. The dining room held a small table, set for 4. There was one dish that was smeared and held the remnants of decomposing food. A fork and knife were resting alongside the plate, waiting to be used for one more bite. The china cabinet was much more interesting. I peered through the glass with the light of my phone, then reeled back as a bleached white rodent skull stared back at me with hollowed-out eyes and tiny sharp teeth. How long had that thing been trapped in there? How long had Aunt Natalia been dead? Knowing it was dead and couldn't hurt me, I unlocked the cabinet. Instead of expensive silverware, plates, or anything resembling precious metal, there were bones, turtle shells, and different dried-out plants, some crushed and in tiny herb jars. Most labels were peeling and faded. The only thing I could read was in letters I couldn't understand. The old country, I snickered. The mess continued in the kitchen. Whatever had been on the plate had been first cooked in the pan. Now it was covered in a layer of gray fuzz. Dark amber grease stains smeared over the backsplash and on the handle of the stove and refrigerator.
Each cabinet knob was stickier than the last as I searched each cupboard for the china and silverware that should have been in the hutch. Minutes later, my fingers were covered in a layer of grime sprinkled with dust. There were no valuables in the kitchen either. I passed back through the dining room, feeling the eyes of the rodent skull on me as I made my way to the staircase. My hand gripped a layer of grime on the banister, matching the kitchen. The effect of never having washed your hands passed filth on from the kitchen to the banister. I took one stair at a time, constantly looking over my shoulder to the empty living room below. At the top of the stairs, shadows flickered. My heart leapt up into my throat and I stood frozen. A whirling seeped through the cracks of the house. I watched the shadow sway, then realized it was the sun, higher in the sky now, breaking through the wall of trees around the house. "Hello?" I shouted. The shadows placed doubts in my eyes I was alone. After all, in this neighborhood there could be any number of homeless squatters taking up my aunt's bedroom. "We're all here," I shouted again, bluffing with the threat of numbers to scare off anyone waiting. With no reply, no floor creaks or windows opening, I became convinced I was alone. At the top of the stairs, those shadows were turned. The sun was up now, coming in through the treetops. I pulled the sheer curtain back to look out at the backyard. The fence was down in places, and the grass was knee-high. The smell that lingered downstairs was much stronger up here. I thought it was the rotten food down on the dining room table and stove, but as I pinched my nose and breathed through my mouth, I began to think it was coming from up here. I tugged up on the window. It didn't budge. Inspecting the latch, I saw a bent nail head half pounded in the frame, then a few more that had made it all the way in, making sure the window would stay closed. With the stink now burning my eyes, I did a quick sweep of the 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom to make sure I was really alone. Nothing stood out as the source of the smell other than a pile of dirty laundry in the bedroom and one in the bathroom. It was time to dig into the closets, under the beds, and in every dresser drawer to find family jewels or stock certificates, something to make this disgusting house worth my time. Squatting at the closet door, I stuck my hand into a shoebox filled with tissue paper. Empty. I tossed it over my shoulder into a pile of several others. All empty. Disgusted, I turned to the bed. The sheets were pulled back, wrinkled where she had last lay. She was still my family, and thinking of her lifeless body there made it difficult to look at. Under my shoe, something cracked. I lifted my shoe and saw the crushed remains of tiny, bleached bones. My mind tried to decipher the scattered bones, the tiny shapes joining to make an animal I might recognize. Then I stepped back and saw the tiny boneyard was in a ring all the way around the bed. More rodent's bones, this time not on display in some curiosity cabinet. No, these bones were carefully laid out in a circle 2 feet away from the bed. There must be dozens of rats and mice and some other bigger animals mixed in as well. What was Aunt Natalia into? I said aloud, catching myself and looking around the room to make sure no one was there to respond. The bedroom door slammed shut. I spun on my heels, arms out ready for anything. The whirling of the wind crept through the room. It had to be the wind. My feet shuffled through the bones to the door. The old brass knob, a dingy brown, spun in my hand. I jerked it open. A shadow danced on the stairwell wall. I wanted the wind theory to be enough. My brain fought to be convinced I was alone and the door slamming was the wind. But to have that slam there had to be another open door or window somewhere. The bones, the noises, and the slamming of the door was a reminder to do the right thing and call my brother, get him over here, and we can search the house together. The idea of splitting whatever we find was better than doing this on my own. I convinced myself it was the best way to handle it all as I came down the stairs. The living room was brighter now, more of that sun finding its way in. That's how I saw the black rectangular shape of an open door. "Hello," I said. Had I left it open during my search? Maybe just enough for the wind to blow it open. I walked around, checking the first floor of the house, and I didn't see anyone. Then I came back to the open door and looked down at another stairwell.
The plan was to call my brother and set up a time to come back, escaped my thoughts as a sudden salivation filled my mouth. The money would be down in the basement. Someone from the old country would bury their fortune in the basement, not keep it in shoeboxes upstairs. My phone was out, lights still on, as I flipped the screen up to look at Rod's contact in the phone and waited. Bringing Rod in on the treasure hunt was the right thing to do. I dialed. Nothing happened. I pulled it away from my ear to see no bars, no signal of any kind. How long had I gone without a signal? Checking the time, my visit so far has been nearly an hour. My wife must have tried to text me by now. I started to turn around, go outside and get a signal. My feet wouldn't move. My eyes drifted back to a dark stairwell wrapped in beadboard with flacking paint. I could see the top of stone lined with cement where the sub-basement walls began. It's where the gold is, I thought. It's gotta be. My hand moved for the light switch. Bad wiring or not, I needed to look over every inch of this basement. Flipped on, nothing happened. Flipped a few more times in a hurry to get the lights on. Just darkness before me. Down into the earth with only the light of my phone to guide my way. From every corner of the stairwell, silvery strands of spiderweb gently swayed with every exhaled breath. Tiny creatures wrapped in webbing dangled as the spider's feed bag. The air was thicker, more humid than upstairs. I touched the stone wall for balance and quickly withdrew damp fingertips. Taking one stair at a time, I carefully descended into the darkness. Every hair on my body seemed to yell out as the ambient light from upstairs faded, forcing me to rely solely on my phone's light. The house was creepy, but now below ground something was different. Something in my gut was slowing my steps, keeping me from moving forward. The shadows from my phone flickered and twitched as I held the light in my trembling hand. I didn't want to be down here. Any possible treasure was losing value the longer I stayed down there. The basement took up most of the footprint of the house. These old homes were usually made that way. Dig a hole, line it with stone, then build over it. Later, people finished the interior walls, making basements more livable. Not my aunt. The exposed field stones created hundreds more tiny crevices of pure blackness, each one holding something hidden in the dark. There were a few stacked boxes before me. Up close, I looked for a label or some kind of indication as to what was inside. The recent encounter with dead rodents left me slow to open them. It was why I was here. I had to see what was inside before I left. I pulled back one flap, then two as I raised the phone in my other hand and looked in. Folded clothes. My mind went to Levi's from the 1940s, but reality sunk in with the tags of modern stores, places I would shop now for clothes. I moved the box aside and knelt before the one on the ground. I stared in and found nothing but blankets. I sat back in disgust. My fingers were dirty, so were my sweatpants. That musty smell was caught in my throat, and I coughed, sending dust off the tops of other boxes. The phone was on the floor, the light up, showing me the wooded beams holding the house together. I waved the light over the rest of the boxes. That's when I saw something just beyond them, over by the far wall. Beyond the boxes was a small clearing. I shined the light around, hoping to see something that I could take and run the hell out of here already. What I found made me want to run away empty-handed. There, in the center of the room, a large red circle was painted on the floor. In the circle were dolls made from sticks, bits of hair and fabric. I knelt, inspecting the tiny human shapes. Each doll was about the size of my hand and distinctly different. At the center of the circle were the decomposing remains of, I wasn't sure, about the size of a raccoon, the skin drawn taut, most of the hair gone, exposing bones locked in their sockets. The animal was curled in on itself, except for the head. It stretched back, mouth open, exposing sharp, tiny teeth. I kept thinking this was a monkey. It had to be a monkey. The floor above creaked. In the light, a sheen of dust settled down onto my shoulders. I blinked out the dust in my eyes. Someone was in the house. First, the door slammed, and now the footsteps quickly shuffled above. I had nowhere to go but up there and face what was there.
I held my breath, my hearing heightened by the darkness. I listened for anything that was alive. Maybe that is where I went wrong, trusting any creak of the floor or door closing came from a living thing. I left the circle of dolls and bones behind as I grabbed the handrail and started up the stairs. I stopped, cold, my breath catching in my throat as the door slowly opened. At the top of the stairs was a small, hunched figure. Wild, straw-like hair radiated out and down her shoulders over a black flowing nightgown. Her bony finger came towards me. "Damien? Is that you, Damien?" It was Aunt Natalia. But how? The call. The sheriff's department said, "Yes, Aunt Natalia," I said. She took a step towards me. My toes gripped the step, keeping me from falling back. "Thank you for coming. Now that you are here, I want to show you something." She took another step, and then another, until I had no choice but to go back down the stairwell and into the basement once more. "Aunt Talia, how are you feeling? I was worried about you and thought I would come over," I said, backing up to the circle, my heels catching the outside of the red ring. She brushed past me, mumbling incoherent words that repeated like some kind of chant. Careful to step over the red line of the circle, she turned with her arms spread. "Now we are all here." I panned the light of my phone around the room. It was still just the two of us, as far as I could tell. Then I saw she was looking down at the dolls. Come in and join us," Natalia said, waving me closer with those bone-thin fingers. Blue veins popped and wrapped around her hands as she beckoned me into the circle. My feet didn't move. I was stuck to the floor, confused by fear of what I was seeing. Her eyes, once dark, covered in bags, were brighter now. The whites were glowing like a midnight moon, so much so I didn't need the light of the cell phone to see them. "Join us," she said over and over. "We're all here. Look." She pointed down at each doll, then stared at me, turning her head slightly on her ear, those eyes glowing yellow, waiting for my response. "All here except your brother Rodney, but don't worry, he will be along soon." "Aunt Talia, are you okay?" I said. My voice was shaky and my breathing too shallow to say anything very loudly. My head was spinning, the muscles in my legs were tingling, and I needed a chair. "I have something for you. Do you remember as a boy, Aunt Natalia always had something for the children?" She reached into the layers of a black nightgown and pulled out something small, maybe a leather pouch about the size of an old coin bag. My legs regained their strength as I moved towards the circle. She held the item up. It wasn't a leather purse, but a small leather doll. Brown hair on top and a familiar pattern to a small patch of clothing. I leaned closer, getting a better look. Then I recognized the patch of cloth. It was from my shirt, green and blue plaid, the shirt I was going to wear this morning. My legs, continuing to act independently, turned, bringing my waist and torso with it. My neck twisted as I stared at the doll in familiar clothing. I was up the stairs in a blink of an eye. Then I had to navigate through the kitchen, past the bone-filled curiosity cabinet in the dining room, and finally out the door, never looking back until I was in the warmth of my car. I hit the locks, then worked to control my breathing. What had I just seen? The doll, Talia's eyes, and those bones scattered around the house. My phone rang. I stared at the incoming call from Rod. "Hello? Hey, bro, I got some bad news." "Okay." I was slow to respond, my eyes fixed on the old house I once thought to inherit. "Aunt Natalia died last night," he said. I gripped the phone. "But," I started, breathing heavily into the phone. "But she isn't dead. There must have been a mix-up." "No mix-up. I'm telling you, Rod, she isn't dead."
Take it easy, Damien. I didn't know you were that close to her. Sorry, she's dead. I'm here at the morgue, staring at her body." The phone thudded on the floorboard of the car as I turned the key and sped out of there, leaving my inheritance behind.
The story ends here, but the fear you felt, that stays with you. Thank you for stepping into Phobia of Fear.